terrifying things about the way we live now, like climate change and disease and stuff. And I think that it's good to be worried about those things, but maybe there's a point when you realize that your worry is controlling your life, or you're taking actions that seem beyond what you would normally do, and you're a little bit worried about them, or they're kind of extreme. I think there's a difference between reading the news a lot and being really, really well aware, and then going, you know what? I have a year's worth of food. I have a whole bunch of guns. And, if danger comes to my door, maybe I'm John Wick.
Maybe.
You know what I mean? I think that's the level at which it might start spinning out of control.
Okay, because I never know. I've been mentioning this lately. I don't know how this has come up more than once, but I talked to David Koepp on this show earlier this year, and he wrote this book about, it's like a thriller about one of these solar flares that shuts off power on the whole planet, which is actually a plausible scenario. This could happen theoretically. And so, the world is tipped into disaster mode. And I think one of these things happens once every 100 years, give or take. And it's been 130 years since the last one. And the last one happened before the world was electrified. Do you know what I'm saying? So we haven't really seen the shit hit the fan once we've had power, electric power. And so we went through this, all this conversation and talk about it and how terrifying it is. And then I was like, wow, well, having written this book, you must be somebody who's got a year's supply of food and a bunch of guns in the basement or whatever it is. And he's like, oh no, he's like, I can't bring myself to get there. And so it's interesting to have awareness of the dangers that we face and the way that things may well go, and to not take action. I have kind of a go bag for an earthquake. I live in Los Angeles. Do you live in Los Angeles?
I do. I also have a go bag for an earthquake.
Okay, yeah. So where are you? Yeah. And you're relatively new to town, right?
Yeah, I moved here 6 months before the pandemic. And then, I read all the news about how you're supposed to have a go bag for an earthquake. So I said, okay, I can do that.
Okay. But where are you on the scale of preparedness?
I have, other than the earthquake go bag, I have beans and rice, and that's it. And if the power goes out, I am going to soak those beans in water until they are soft enough to chew. That's the level of prepared that I am.
But how much beans? How much rice? We talking a 6-month supply or what?
Oh, I'm so bad at gauging the supplies. Plus, I live in a house with 2 other people, and we are big eaters. I honestly think it's 6 months, and it would end up being a month and a half.
Yeah.
That's where we are. It's pounds and pounds. And every time, every once in a while, the thing I freak out about is every once in a while on Twitter, somebody will be like, Ebola. And these days, and so I'm always okay, this is my Ebola stash. I used to work with a guy from Uganda, and he was always you don't understand, Ebola is bad. And so in case Ebola pops up, I'm going to be chewing on my chewy beans.
Yeah, I got, I think when I freaked out, it was after the Houston hurricane. Where there's all this footage of people just in canoes and just the awfulness, and I was I gotta be ready. If this shit hits the fan here, it could happen in a different way here, but it could happen just as bad. And then for food though, all I have is a giant box of power bars or but they're old now. I think they're past expiration. I got to get some beans and rice is what I got to get.
And some more power bars.
Yeah, I don't know what I think I was just well, what could we survive on that would, give us protein, or I don't know what it was. But I think beans and rice is maybe the better way to go. Dried beans and rice keep for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And they're a complete protein. I read up on that thanks to vegetarian cookbooks from the 70s. So,
what about weapons? Are we into weapons or no?
No, absolutely not. At one point, I thought there was an intruder at one of my apartment doors, and there was somebody who was just trying to get in, and it turns out it was a guy who was drunk on some drugs or whatever, and just mistook our apartment, which looked exactly the same as his, for ours, and he was just trying to get in with this key. But at the time, I was okay, I have a hammer, and then my husband grabbed a knife from the kitchen, and then we grabbed a chair to jam the door shut, and we were just standing there okay, this is our plan, we got this, and we didn't end up using any of those things, and after that, we realized we were not weapons people, and we decided to concede that to other folks.
Well, listen, I think that, it's one thing to have these things on hand. It's another thing to have the presence of mind to quickly grab them. When there's an actual home invasion, it tends to happen quickly when you're not expecting it. It's not like these people send you a heads up. And then to suddenly, I think you almost have to be trained to respond properly, because I have like pepper spray and a baseball bat and all this stuff. And I don't know. I was thinking the other day, I was like, I don't think I would probably grab it. I think I would probably just like run or like jam the door. I don't know what I would do, but I doubt it would be something super elegant.
I also think there's the hubris involved in going, okay, so like the nukes are going to hit, and out of all the people in the world, I am going to be alive.
And
I'm going to.
Who would want to be alive? I don't understand the desire to be the last man standing after a giant like nuclear event. It just seems like it'd be better to go. I mean, maybe that's bleak, but that's kind of how I feel.
Well, after watching Last Man on Earth, I completely agree. They don't make it look fun. I like just hanging out in your empty pool in Phoenix all day.
Wait, is that that's the comedy, the guy from Saturday Night Live?
Yep. Will
okay.
Forte.
Yeah, Will Forte. Right. All right. So yeah, you're writing a novel about people. Like, another thing that your book made me think about was, late capitalism. Mm-hmm. And the cruelty of it, and the way that it kind of chews people up and spits people out, or like never even chews people up to begin with. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, it leaves people alienated and isolated and with a deep sense of being on their own. And there's a quote from a character in your book named Brittany where she says, I lost so many jobs and so many friends who didn't want to hang out with someone who didn't have a job. So I only have me, and I decided to protect myself. Like, that felt like an essential line in the book to me. Like, just, it gets to the heart of why these people are the way they are. And I think it's relatable. I think it's something that a lot of people feel as they advance into adult life, is this like, oh my God, like, this is a really cold system. And I think that it does things to good people. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, I think it can make good people like ungenerous, not necessarily because they're evil, but because they're scared. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it kind of isolates us from one another, and it makes people feel this sense of it's every man for himself or herself.
We are scared, and our society has a lot of rules. I think, honestly, you have to follow a lot of rules to be allowed to belong to society. And if at any point, like, you end up falling off the path, like you become unemployed or something, people are scared that unemployment is contagious, and they will just decide to hide from you, or they'll be afraid that you're going to ask them for a job and they don't know how to hook you up with one, or they don't know anybody who'll help, and so they don't feel useful, or so they'll hide from you. I have gone through long periods of unemployment where I have not had that many friends. And the other thing is, I don't know, maybe it's such a tragedy where people go, oh, you're unemployed. It's like difficult to talk about, like if people get like divorced friends who shared like similar circumstances, like this is such a big traumatic event in your life, and I don't know how to talk about it. And so one way to not talk about it is to not text you back,
Right. Like, people, that's the thing. I feel like people don't know how to help, or like you say, they're scared that it's going to be contagious, or I guess in a worst case scenario, they blame you for it. Like, well, you just didn't make the right choices, or you're lazy, or whatever it might be, a way to sort of explain it away and to feel better about having like zero sense of responsibility to help. Right. It's like, it's her job, or it's his job to figure it out.
I think especially when I was living in New York, where a lot of conversation is about what are you doing for employment, there's definitely this, well, what are we even going to talk about?
Right.
Mentality that comes up sometimes. If you don't have a job,
right.
You're talking about our lives, the weather? No.
Yeah. Well, listen, I can't stand that line of adult conversation, like small talk. Like, what do you do? What do you do? It's so exhausting. I don't care what somebody does. I want to hear about what's going on in their lives. Or, you don't have to get like super touchy feely with me, but like, I just feel like that's such a lazy conversation. Like, I get you have to find a way in to get to know somebody, but I think too often it's loaded. It's like a way of investigating somebody's class status, or I don't know how well enmeshed they are in the system. Like, have they found a way to sort of thrive within it? And I don't know, as somebody who sort of like feels alienated and outside of all that, it's not something I love. I got to be honest.
Oh, me neither. I also spent long periods freelancing. And during those periods, I've been invited to like perform at events or talk to people or whatnot. And every once in a while, it'll just be, they'll be like, well, what do you do? And I'll be like, oh, I'm freelancing right now. Well, what do you like really do? I mean, other than that, because freelancing is never a good enough question to somebody who's going on that path.
Right.
And it's just like, I'm actually doing work that I find fulfilling. It's not like sexy or whatever. It's not high profile, but I'm writing some things that I care about, and I'm happy with that. And yeah, I'm looking for stuff, but my entire identity is not looking for something more stable.
Right. Is it any better in LA, have you found, than it is in New York? Because I know New York, I mean, there's a lot of ambition in New York. It's like the hub of the world economy or whatever. Like, I think LA is the hub of maybe the entertainment economy to some degree, but it seems like two sides of the same coin. But is it any different in your 6 months of being here?
I have no idea because I haven't met enough people. I feel like you have to like meet people and get close enough to have those conversations. And so I just do not
You've got
know.
like pandemic LA experience, right?
Yes, I have. Yes.
It might
and
be.
I think some people are pretty comfortable pandemicing. Like a lot of folks are just. Yeah.
What about you? Are you comfortable with it or no?
Really, honestly, yeah. I mean, I haven't had COVID yet, and I think that's cool, but that's probably because I mostly work from home.
Right.
And I'm cool with that. I would love to meet people at some point when I feel better about the situation, but I guess that is my inner survival. So I'm just sort of like, I don't know about going on getting COVID.
Listen, we are the same way. I've had COVID, but everybody else in my family has not. And my mom has not. I mean, knock on wood. Like people are always like, "Do you honestly know anybody who hasn't had it yet?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, I mean, I've got 3 people in my household who haven't had it, and maybe this is where, like, I have a son who's immunocompromised, so it's like we've got to be careful, or we feel like we've got to be extra careful. But it's like possibly where my paranoia comes in, and I'm always looking out. Like, are people really pretending that this is over? Like I'm always, Eric Fingelding on Twitter, that doctor.
Yep.
His last name is now a verb in our household. We're like, I'm Fingeldinging. Like it's, like it's like 1 a.m. and I'm on my phone, just like, oh my God, like he's running through the stats, like all over the world. And I'm like, this shit is not over yet. People are pretending that it is. Like, I find that, and this is sort of thematically connected to your book. Like, I find this like insistence that things are normal versus like hard data coming in from various places around the world, like wherever a hotspot is and how the virus is sort of mutating and migrating all over the place. There's like a real dissonance there. And it sort of makes me a little bit crazy because I feel like people aren't living in reality. You have that?
I completely agree. I am between TV jobs right now, other than one development thing. But at my last gig, like people were kind of getting it in rounds, during the period where everybody was saying it was over. Like my coworkers would keep getting COVID. And so somebody would show up and then like have a cough for 6 weeks and be like, so when can I work out again? And it was just like, why do you want to work out while you still have the cough? Like, could you chill? Like, you have one body,
Yeah. Yeah.
Surely the workout can wait a couple of weeks or months or whenever you stop coughing.
Not in LA. The workout cannot wait. People will go to Pilates with like pneumonia, they don't care. So this book is about, I think, the dissolution of the American dream. It's about contemporary hustle culture. I got to say too, there's something like, just to give listeners an overview, your protagonist is named Aretha. She is single. It's millennial, right? That's the generation?
Yeah.
Okay. Single millennial, New Yorker, lawyer who is sort of disaffected in her work life, her day job life, and is, dating a lot. And then she meets this guy named Aaron, who's sort of like great guy. It's like after all these unhappy dates, she goes on a date with Aaron and he's like got his shit together. He's got kind of a sunny personality. And he runs his own like boutique coffee company. He's a homeowner, like all these things. He's ticking all these boxes. But I laughed when I read, because the name of his coffee company is called Tactical Coffee. And as somebody who's like, I've got like a passing fluency in entrepreneur culture, just because I'm always trying to like think of hustles like everybody else. And I remember reading something. I'm reading something online, I think, about like how these people made a great business. And it was these guys who started this company called Black Rifle Coffee.
Them.
Was that an influence? Was that, I felt like Tactical Coffee was sort of like a little bit of a nod or a joke at that. Am I right?
It's funny. I didn't find them until 3 years in, 6 drafts in.
Oh, okay.
I was in Vegas, and all of a sudden, like walking through a souvenir shop, and they had Black Rifle Coffee, and I was like, holy shit.
Listen, but you're somehow predictive. I feel like writers and artists who have like, especially somebody like you, who I think has like a really good like internal weather vane for like the culture and the politics of the time and all that kind of stuff. Like sometimes there are these sort of synchronicities, right? Where you come up with something creatively that just happens to align with something that's actually happening out there. And for people listening who don't know, like Black Rifle Coffee is like a right-wing coffee company because like Starbucks is too femme. I mean, this is my reading. They've made a mint, these guys. They found their market. It's like for bros who want like manly coffee. They want like a weapon on the bag of coffee that they buy.
A certain percentage of their sales goes to like military causes.
Yeah.
Like, this whole brand. I've just spent days on their website. I am obsessed.
Yes. I mean, right? This is like the world that we live in now. And I'm like, I think what gets to me is the fact that they're so successful. It's like, wow, you just like the coffee that they're selling is no different, I would posit, than any other coffee out there. But the brand that they're selling is identity based. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's the rifle on the package that they're selling to get people to feel a sense of like alignment and identification with them. And that shit works. So like, man,
and
I don't know
names of the beans, Fighting Terrorist Blend, like AR-15 Dark.
Oh my God. Is that for real? Is it AR? Is that?
No, I'm riffing, but like basically, yes, the names of the blends of the coffee do evoke weapons, strength, and the military.
Oh my God. I mean, right? So there we go. That I feel like is somehow like emblematic of the world that you're depicting in your book. And I want to talk a little bit about like prepping. As it exists in this book, 'cause you kind of touched on this earlier, but like these people collectively own a home. It's Aaron, who is Aretha's love interest, and then she ends up moving in with them. And Aaron has 2 roommates, Brittany, who is, well, how do you describe her? Like as angry FloJo. There's some great descriptions in the book, like the human equivalent of a closed fist or something like that. But she's sort of like opaque in her presentations. Like it's hard person to read, but she's got some anger in her. She's usually wearing a tracksuit, and she's like very committed to self-protection. Is there anything I'm missing?
Yeah, I think I described her as Cruella de Vil in track pants.
Okay, there we go. And then James, the other guy, is like a former journalist who used to work at the Washington Post, but then lost his gig because of plagiarism. And I think he's kind of bitter about it. He drinks a lot. He's sort of morose, quiet, also kind of hard to read, like not necessarily the most outgoing guy. And those 2 people are often who Aretha is interacting with, because Aaron's often out like traveling around the world in search of like, exquisite coffee beans, right?
Yep.
And these people not only are running guns, which is how they make money, but they're also collecting, like a stockpile of weapons for whatever shit eventually hits the fan. But they've built like their level of commitment, just so that listeners understand, is that they've built a bunker big enough for 4 people under their backyard, which I suppose is like what, for like a nuclear event or for when they need to hide out or when like the next hurricane hits, which, again, this book reminded me of that. Like New York is now in like a hurricane zone. I don't think 10 or even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have associated it with that. But after Sandy, it's like, oh yeah, this shit can happen in New York now. Like if the weather hits the right way. So they're sort of prepared for all of that stuff. And I guess like what happens in the book or the story that you're telling is that Aretha is kind of like this person who's walked the straight and narrow. She's kind of done everything the quote unquote right way. And over the course of your novel, she's splintering off of that. she's sort of leaving behind, that identity or that version of herself, and finding that she, at least to some degree, responds to the Brittany and the James like worldview. That's the tension in the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much of that do you? I mean, I guess I'm curious how much of that you feel personally. Like, have you ever thought to yourself, you know what? Like, I'm going to fully go rogue? Because that was another phrase that I thought of. I was like, this is about a woman who's going rogue, kind of, or at least flirting with going fully rogue. You ever come close?
Not really. I am so boring. I just wake up in the morning and I make my coffee and I raise my kid and I write things down.
Yeah.
But Aretha is basically, to me, someone who is having more fun than I am about the frustrations of late capitalism. I feel like I have definitely felt her alienation. I've definitely felt her inability to stick him on the path to success and partner. I have definitely felt her frustration with just always following the rules all the time and not having that work for you at all. I think I belong to a generation of people that was told, well, you go to college and you'll be fine. Well, you buy a house and you'll be fine. And a lot of us are going to college and ending up with absolutely insane amounts of student debt and not being fine, and then not finding enough job security to pay that debt, and then not being fine, and then not being able to afford that house, and then not being fine.
Right.
And so the part of Aretha that is 100% me is the part who is just like, I was promised all these things. And like, I'm Black, I wasn't promised them 100%. Like we occupy a different economic and social strata than a lot of folks, but I still felt that promise. And I do feel like I wake up every day and I look that promise in the eye and I go, what were they telling us? Why did I make some of these straight line decisions? Why did I think the last job I had was the job I'm going to have forever? Why am I such a sucker?
Right.
Is there something else out there? For me, it's not gun running and it's not survivalism, but is there some other way of existence under late capitalism that is more satisfying than pretending I was going to be a lawyer for 20 years?
Right. Well, you were a lawyer. That was something I wanted to get to. Like your protagonist, you were a lawyer, I believe an antitrust lawyer?
Yes.
Okay, so just to prove to you how little I know in general, but especially about lawyering, like what does an antitrust lawyer do? I don't even, like antitrust, it feels kind of financial. I don't know. But like, what is antitrust?
I would say back that antitrust lawyers functionally do nothing because no one is trying to break up the trust. Theoretically, antitrust lawyers are there to make sure that competition is maintained. But the Supreme Court made it in the 70s so that you really can't consider the role of the consumer in terms of like whether, say, if two companies merge, is that good for the consumer? You're not supposed to think about that. You're supposed to think about the market. And so you're not thinking about, are prices lower? Are there more locations of like a grocery store under this merger? You're just supposed to go, well, something, the invisible hand of the market, which is basically just we should let them merge because they're companies and who are we to stand in their way? But theoretically, antitrust law was invented in like the early 1900s to try to make things better for not just the economy, but the consumer, to make prices lower, to make goods more available. It just doesn't fulfill that function. So in reality, what an antitrust lawyer does is, I was on the defense side. So like rich companies would hire me and the other lawyers at my firm to say that they weren't doing anything anti-competitive. And if you're on the government side, which I did briefly a couple of times, you're being hired to go, well, I mean, is there anything that is bad about this merger? But probably not. So we probably are going to let it go through. And is there anything anti-competitive here? We think there is. And let's ask for enough docs and let's genuinely try to prove this. But at the end of the day, given 40 years of Supreme Court cases that say that we don't really care about the consumer, we're probably not going to find anything that will truly prove that somebody has a monopoly. And even if we do, we're not going to break up the company. We are not necessarily sure how to break up companies, but we also just, like mood-wise, that's not really the mood we're in. We're not going to go around breaking up like Google because we think they control ad search. That's kind of edgy,
right?
So yeah, functionally antitrust lawyers do nothing. But
that's got to be dispiriting, though, right? Is it dispiriting? Was it dispiriting for you as a lawyer to be like? Because I first of all, I sense that maybe your sympathy would be on the side of the consumer, but then to be working in the defense side. And to also just be realizing that like there's really not much sympathy out there, like systemically for the consumer position. It's just like corporations, they spend billions to lobby Congress. They sort of run the show, right? I mean, it's kind of a rigged game, right?
It ate me alive. I was an economics major in college too, which is probably how I ended up in this. And I wanted to be consumer focused. I wanted like lower prices and like, things that were better for the consumer, for everyone. I'm more of a workers' rights chick. And so it really was depressing to go and practice this thing of law and realize that, I mean, you end up doing a lot of defense type stuff coming out of law school because the loans are awful. I mean, I had like 240,000 student debt, okay?
Yeah.
Which is why it makes more sense for a lot of people who do not have, I'm working class, the backgrounds where you can sit there and cover law school tuition and the expenses and whatever, to go and work defense sides so you can pay off the loans. And then theoretically, after you pay off the loans, you're supposed to do something that's more for you. You know what I mean? But it might take like 15 years to do that, 30 years to pay off the loans. And so by that time, I mean, are you even still a lawyer? They're firing a lot of lawyers. They were firing a lot of lawyers in 2008. The industry has shrunk a lot since then. There aren't a lot of opportunities to work in housing companies. The government had a hiring freeze when I was like 5 years out. And so they couldn't hire anybody, which sucks. I kind of wanted to go back to government and at least like pretend to be on the good side, even if the government wasn't accomplishing what I wanted them to antitrust wise. It was frustrating the whole time. And I mean, honestly, I was doing all right. I mean, I had friends who were representing banks that had financed apartheid on the defense side. Like, even as a corporate lawyer, it can get really dark.
I think most people think of the legal profession and being an attorney and, getting out of law school and passing the bar and working for some big corporation as an attorney. It's like, oh, you got it made. But even that profession is squeezed. And I've also heard that a lot of lawyers are not happy, that even though the pay can be good, that the work itself can be really dispiriting or just like such a grind. Like you're working, 60-hour weeks and people are just not happy. Does that square with your experience?
Oh, I'll let you know when I meet a happy lawyer. Yeah. Including everybody I know from law school and myself and every lawyer I ever met afterwards. And first lawyer I meet will be the first happy lawyer.
Wow.
Maybe out there?
Okay. Yeah. So you have had I think from the outside looking in, a varied and very successful career. And you've been able to transition to a creative career with a plum, and I want to track that because I think listeners will be curious, like how you did it. You have a lawyer job and then somehow you go from that to having like a really funny Twitter feed to writing for Trevor Noah's The Daily Show, Pod Save America. You're writing for TV out here now. I think there's a show called The Great North, if I have that right. Can you just talk a little bit about getting from antitrust law to entertainment?
I won't lie. I have a financially and emotionally supportive husband. I think it's important to tell the truth about that. He can cover a lot of our expenses. I can screw around on the creative side. But it was something that I wanted to do since I was 10, be a writer. I wrote bad books when I was 10. I was like, I'm going to write noir and then I'm going to illustrate it. And I have no idea what like detectives even are when I was 10, but I really have to figure this out. And then I wrote bad poetry, and then I wrote good poetry, and then I wrote bad prose, and then I wrote good prose. And I had a really supportive English teacher. But somewhere in that transition, I just decided to go back to that whole school thing. So I wrote, badly before I could write better. And started sending my work out and I started out in short stories. I started out sending things to literary journals. And then I met a woman at a party who was like, is there any way you could do an essay about my kind of gross hometown, Madison, Wisconsin, which has major issues that people don't love to talk about on things like race.
That's where you're from?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm from Wisconsin.
Oh, no way. Where?
Yeah, I was born in Milwaukee. I grew up in...
No way! Milwaukee, the city?
I grew up in Cedarburg, little town north of, it's like got like when I was a kid, this was the 70s and the 80s. So, I'm old, but it was a lovely, there was like a general store, and like
it's really cute.
It's cute, but I feel like it's changed a lot. I read a story in Politico about Cedarburg in I think it was either 2016 or the 2020 election cycle. And I was like, whoa, like, it feels like it took a turn. Like it was very working class and like friendly. I don't know. That's just my memory of it. I left when I was 11, so I have like sort of an idealized memory of it. But I am a Wisconsinite, and so yeah, we're going to talk about it. But I just wanted to flag that you're from Madison. You were at a party, and this woman was talking to you about an essay.
And I said, oh, I can write an essay, even though I'd never written an essay for publication before. I was like, how many words do you need? What's your deadline? And so I just bluffed my way through that. And then it accidentally did really well. And then people started emailing me to write other essays. And then what's funny is I think, and then my third piece was for The Atlantic. And everything just like about growing up in the 90s when Andrew Wakefield was good science and people genuinely believed the MMR vaccine caused autism, and like having let go of that way of thinking when I had my own kid. And just nobody, I guess, had written about just actually used to like being an anti-vaxxer back in the day and changing your mind. And it got like 800,000 views and an absolute ton. Like comment sections were insane in like 2015. And then people started writing me for other things. And then the Daily Show was a DM thing. Like somebody DM'd me at like 3 a.m. on Twitter.
From The Daily Show? From
The Daily Show, yeah.
Okay, but wait. So you start writing these essays. One of the essays goes viral, essentially. And you were an anti-vaxxer.
Yep.
And then you had a kid. That's relatable, because I always I think about people who are anti-vaxxers. I'm like, do you have children? I guess there are some parents who are like, I'm not vaccinating my kid. But, every doctor, like my doctor is an eminently rational human, and she's just like, vaccinate your kid. Like, it's hard to, I don't know what ground I'm standing on. Like, I'm kind of paranoid about what I put in my body, and like, I sort of get the temperament, but like, I don't know, like so many millions and millions and billions of people are vaccinated. I think we would know if it was like really fucking people up, like en masse, right? I don't know. But anyway, the essay goes viral, and then from there, what? Like, is that how?
I skipped a bunch of stuff. I started telling jokes on the internet because my son got big enough that he wasn't like putting random things in his mouth. And I was like doing short stories. I was freelancing a little bit, but I was like, I always wanted to learn how to tell jokes. Like that was always a dream of mine. And then so I had this Twitter account, but like I had like 200 people. And so I just decided to throw random jokes at them every day until I got a style I liked. And that ended up being successful beyond my wildest dreams.
Okay. What's the style? What did you, like, it sounds like you were actually like systematic about it. Like you were actually testing, and then like trying to hone like a delivery pattern or something, like, because you've had great success on Twitter. How did you do it? What is the style?
I guess a lot of my twists are mean. I really feel like this has been just a banner era for mean comedy. People were really depressed about like the late Obama era, and then definitely depressed about Trump. And if you just woke up in the morning and like framed your punchlines in a mean way, people were like, yeah, let's be dicks.
But I would say that your tweets have like your moral compass is good. Like I feel like you're tweeting from a place of goodness, and you're punching up. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like your targets are, at least from my perspective, the right targets. If your jokes
systemic
are mean.
Injustice bothers me deeply.
Yeah.
Somebody who's both a victim of it and cannot stand seeing other victims of it. I mean, every once in a while, somebody will just be shafted on pay or a job or unionization or something. That's the stuff that wakes me up in the morning and gets me angry. I tell jokes about things that I am angry about that are real fissures in American society. But I want to joke about them because I don't know. I think I got around to, I don't want to listen to this seriously. Like, how would I prefer to receive this information?
Right. It's like
punchline.
Yeah, it's a spoonful of sugar, right? It helps people actually like deal with this stuff, because otherwise it's too painful or just onerous. And I think that trying to, like, some people have like a gift, I guess, when it comes to joke telling, or a gift when it comes to Twitter. And I'm endlessly fascinated with like how certain people's accounts take off. I guess it just like people start to retweet you. The algorithm starts to like you, because you've been a mainstay in my feed for a long time, and I'm always fascinated. I'm like, oh, the algorithm is delivering so-and-so. There are certain people or certain feeds that I just get, and I always wonder why. But do you have a sense, like when you trace it back, as to like how it really took off? Was there like a famous person who started to retweet you, or was there something that happened that you felt like elevated it suddenly?
Dan Savage started retweeting me like every day,
Okay.
like 7 years ago. And he had like 300,000 people.
That'll do it.
I can't. That was definitely like an inflection point. All of a sudden I was getting all these people. I was just like, whoa. I don't know that you guys really want to be here, but thanks. But in general, I have been adopted by a succession of bigger accounts over time. And when I got hired at The Daily Show, I got so many comedy people, and we all started retweeting each other. But they were much, much bigger accounts than me. I had like 26,000 people then. And we all just started, but a lot of them had similar sensibilities. I like comedy writers a lot. I feel like a lot of them are also concerned, the ones I've met, with issues of systemic injustice, at least in late night.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting around talking about like politics all the time, and that just seemed to be where people fell.
Well, especially at The Daily Show. I mean, The Daily Show is a political comedy show versus like Jimmy Fallon. You know, I'm sure they have concerns there, but you know what I'm saying. I don't know if the writers' room is as political there, you know, or as concerned. Maybe I'm wrong.
I hate to make generalizations because so much of what you end up talking about in the writers' room doesn't go on the show, and so I think it's really unfair to judge what is televised by and decide you can draw conclusions about the writers from that. Right. I know what you mean. Yeah.
So I think listening to you and like reading a bit about your bio, like your background, growing up as an African-American girl in Madison, Wisconsin, you know, that's an education of its own. I want to talk more about that, but I can imagine you learned quite a bit about the world in that scenario. Going to school, getting an economics degree, okay, like which is that's an education. That's something I wish I knew more about. And then going to law school, doing antitrust work and sort of the demystification of that process, you know, like, I don't know, like it just feels like, maybe like there could be like a romantic or idealistic notion about being a lawyer that you were quickly disabused of once you actually got out there, right? I mean, that was kind of the track that you were on, or that's kind of the experience that you had, right?
I didn't want to be a lawyer for romantic reasons. I wanted to be a lawyer because I was a working class person who didn't understand what you were supposed to do in college. And then I went to college and I got out of college and I had no idea what you were supposed to do after college. I'm first generation everything. And
okay.
Everybody was like, well, you could take the LSAT. So I took the LSAT and I did well at the LSAT. And then I ended up in law school and then I was a lawyer. It was completely mistaken, but you have to pick a path. I didn't want to work in retail forever. That's what I was doing before that. I spent 6 years at JCPenney.
Oh yeah. And you were piercing ears, right? At the mall. I read that.
That was my first job. Yeah, Claris. I did not pierce a single ear because I did not think that was going to be a great idea. But I quit and went to JCPenney. Okay. So anyway, just to continue my thought, you become a lawyer, then you go out and you have all those experiences professionally. You're trying to pay off student loans and all the rest. You're kind of dealing with like the real world and late capitalism and all that it entails. I feel like the success that you've had as a joke writer on Twitter, comedy writer on Daily Show, just knowing about your perspective, particularly reading your tweets, it kind of brought it into focus for me. You know, this is a person whose life experience and educational experience makes you like very well suited to be as incisive as you are on the issues and to write jokes that are substantive. You know, there's joke writers who are just kind of being silly. You know, there's different ways to tell jokes, but your jokes are funny, but they also tend to have some bite to them. You know what I'm saying? There's like a cultural criticism, or if you want to call it like a meanness, you know, like there's a target and there's a real anger in there and there's an anger at injustice. And you know what I'm saying, right? But I feel like it makes sense. Like all these things sort of prepared you, whether you intended it or not, to get to the place where you would have something to say that was rooted and informed. I agree with that. I think growing up working class, a lot of people in the media are not working class. A lot of people in comedy are not working class. I always felt like I had this very, very different perspective. But the nice thing about both the media and comedy is it taught me that was okay. It was actually 100% okay to approach things differently from a Black working class raised angle and to fight for, you know, that different opinion to be represented. That it was cool to not have the same story as everybody else.
I feel like, I mean, maybe this was your experience, but I feel like people would be, I don't know, like happy to have another perspective, or maybe even like, I don't know, media culture, like you say, like all these people, like you do free internships where you're or not free, but unpaid. You know what I'm saying? Like the way that these things are sort of set up to favor the rich, basically, you know, people who can work for free, you know, to get a foot in the door. That's not a fair system. But I feel like hopefully things are changing a little bit. And I feel like maybe there would be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a sense of respect for somebody who had to kind of come up the hard way. I don't know. Maybe that's not how it would.
Really.
Not really.
And I will not lie. I am a weird example. I don't think that my experience is representative. I think a lot of times of the folks in the media, folks in comedy, sometimes they just sort of want to make money, and making money often involves making people comfortable, not really challenging their assumptions or worldview. I think, to me, well, I've had a successful career. I've also spent long periods just unemployed. And at least some of that, I think, is because I don't come from a perspective that makes people comfortable. And I'm happy to talk about that too. And sometimes people want to hear that, and sometimes they don't. And so, but I don't see it getting easier for like generations of journalists or comedy folks after me or anything like that. I do see people who are fighting, and I'm proud of them. But I think we need more systemic change than that on those fronts if we want to have different opinions really represented. Yeah.
So like even a shred of optimism, like has it gotten even like a little bit better, or no? You feel like
and the TV side, it's awful because I came into TV during peak TV, and now I see all these shows getting canceled and all these things being rebooted from like the 90s. And all these shows being taken off streaming services. So like you have a show and you run it for 2 years and it disappears. And I'm sad about that. I miss people's old archives. I miss just buying a whole bunch of stuff and throwing like spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, and maybe having a show that doesn't have the broadest audience in the world, but has a dedicated audience that's doing stuff that's fun and fresh and different, like succeeding on its own terms. And I'm not sure if that's going to keep happening. I'm excited about TV because it does continue to produce new things, but I'm sad about just how much TV has been decimated to a certain extent by all the cancellations and taking away the back catalog. And the media, it helps if you live in New York, which is the biggest barrier to entry in anything I can think of, given that, the neighborhood I used to live in New York, a 2-bedroom apartment will apparently run you anywhere from $3,500 a month to $5,000 a month now. And that is the biggest barrier to entry in human existence. People do not make that kind of money, and they definitely don't make it on things like entry-level media jobs. And it's really, really hard to live there and eat and not die. And so that is really, really capping the amount and spectrum of perspectives we're getting there.
What neighborhood was it?
Prospect Heights, Brooklyn.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation on this show because so many writers are in Brooklyn and in New York, and it's just like, it's increasingly impossible to live there for so many people because it's so fucking expensive.
I was living in a beautiful sub-market place where the ceiling fell in on me 3 times. That's how I afforded New York.
Which is echoed in your novel, right? Was it termites?
No, it wasn't termites. I don't know what it was, but I did see it come down on me twice. So there's that. Damn.
But that's what I'm saying is that like people will endure incredible like hardship in terms of living standard and like the kind of apartment that they live in just to kind of be there, and they're paying through the nose for it. It's crazy. Like you're not even getting a good place.
It's worth it too.
Yeah,
because you meet so many cool people. A lot of the coolest people I've ever met live in New York. A lot of the coolest things I've ever done are there too.
Yeah, it's a great city. I love visiting. I've never lived there, but I love it. Every time I'm there, it's like, but it seems hard. It seems hard is the point. Like it's just the logistics of life, especially with like young children and everything, and like I don't know the space that you can get in other places versus New York. Like you have to really be flush to have a lot of space in New York. But
the number of friends I had who left the city after the rent raise that like broke the camel's back is so high.
Yeah.
It's
when
like
was
you're
that?
Having a good time, huh?
When was that?
This was like the last couple of years I lived there, 2015, 2016, 2017, up through, I lived there till 2019. Just, you would go to the bar and they'd be like, my rent crossed 3K. I'm really thinking about leaving. Over and over and over again. And I just feel like, because like, I've been hanging out with all these people for years and just, hoping that they were finding a way to do it, because we did talk about it a lot. Like, we talked about, how much people made, how affordable things were. Like, I had this group of friends who was willing to talk about what they were paying in rent, and I appreciated them for that.
Yeah.
Transparency is cool. But yeah, just, people would raise rent and they would scramble. I have a kid, and I definitely, one of the reasons why I was okay with moving to LA is I knew we would never be able to give him like a full bedroom on our budget in New York. Like, he had like a half bedroom. It didn't have a closet.
I was just gonna put him in a drawer when they're little. You could, right?
He's tall for his age. So my husband and I would literally go in there and eyeball his bed and go, okay, how many years do you think we have left?
Right.
Before he outgrows this mattress. Mattress.
Right. So let's talk about Wisconsin a little bit more. You come up working class in Madison, which is often, it makes these lists every year that I like read obsessively because I'm always trying to find like the best place. I don't know. I know it doesn't exist, but I like to pretend that it does. And Madison, I think, has come in at number 1 before on like the list of best towns in America. It's kind of got that reputation. Does that square? What was your experience growing up? Because it's a pretty white place, right? And I don't know. It's kind of a liberal pocket. Milwaukee and Madison are sort of the liberal hubs of Wisconsin, I think, demographically. But can you just talk about growing up there?
When I was growing up there, I didn't meet a single other Black person who wanted to stay there past high school. We all just wanted to leave ASAP. I knew I had to win a scholarship to college because I wanted to get out so bad. And my scholarship was paying my full tuition, but it was keeping me at the University of Wisconsin. I wanted to leave that state. But I didn't have any money. It is liberal, but nobody wants to talk about race. At least they didn't when I was growing up. Maybe that's changed. I don't know. It was liberal, but I went through all the stereotypes. Like, people would touch my hair all the time. Like, I found it hard to get service at the pharmacy, Like, it was way more hardcore than I think it is often depicted as when it's being voted the best place to live. And I remember that. I remember getting picked for those lists like tons and tons of times when I was a kid. And like when I was an older teen, just going, why? Like, it's pretty, but the weather is brutal and the racism is awful. And I've met other Black people who've even lived there temporarily. And it's just like, it was time to leave.
Yeah.
Because of the racism.
Oy. So you went to the University of Wisconsin, got your economics degree.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any artistic like lineage, like anybody creative like in your family that you could point to who you feel like maybe you got your writerly bent from?
My dad put seatbelts in cars. My mom, like, that's what he did for a living until he retired. He worked for General Motors. My mom, I have 2 autistic brothers. She advocates for autistic people to get them better educations and stuff. My mom grew up in like Inglewood in Chicago. It was a place she left, is the way she put it. She was poor. She didn't like talking about it. It was hardcore. My dad just grew up in this lovely working class. Like, I remember reading about Michelle Obama's family background, and it was just like, everybody goes to the factory, and and I was like, yeah, that's like his side.
Yeah.
Everybody has jobs, and they're good jobs, but like they work them a lot, and they're just sort of tired. The community is good there. The South Side is just warm and friendly place to me.
In Chicago.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And but your family has like Southern roots, like your parents. I think I read that. Like, your parents grew up in Chicago, but their parents maybe had moved from the South. Whereabouts? Where from?
Memphis, Little Rock, Arkansas, New Orleans.
Okay, because my parents are from Louisiana. I just curious, but New Orleans, huh?
Where in Louisiana are they from?
Small towns. My dad is from a tiny town on the Gulf Coast called Morgan City. It's like an old petroleum town, like way down. Like during hurricanes, it's always like, will it be there? Like, you're kind of like, yeah, it's intense. And my mom's from a little town called Plaquemine, which is outside of Baton Rouge. But I spent a lot of time down there growing up. But So you go to Madison and you're like, I got to get out of here. Where did you go to law school?
Columbia in New York.
Oh, you did? Okay. So you got out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got out.
That must have been good.
I got out.
Yeah. And were you excited? Was it exciting to be in New York? I mean, did you feel like, I mean, I know like law school's a lot and all that kind of stuff, but like it must have been fun.
It was fantastic. They sent me a postcard when I was applying to college. I was a little late to apply to Columbia undergrad, and I didn't have that kind of cash either. But I remember looking at the back of the postcard and going, where is this?
Yeah.
This looks amazing. And then you show up and it's like just as amazing. I was like, I don't know why. It just feels like the standard campus, like the one that's in movies. And then you show up, of course, and every sure it's like Columbia has appeared in over 300 movies.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is why I think this is what college should look like.
Right.
Because it does.
Yeah. Hell yeah. That's great. What are your folks? I mean, your folks must be thrilled that you're doing this. Like, what was their take on you going off?
Honestly, I don't talk to them. They are hard. Yeah. They own a lot of guns for my taste.
They do.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have you have guns in your family.
I have guns in my family.
Oh yeah. Well, you go to law school, get out, do all that we've kind of talked about. Like, you work for corporations and antitrust, a little bit for the government, make this transition, write for TV, develop this great Twitter feed, publish a bunch of stuff online. I mean, you've been really industrious, I was kind of going through your byline and it's like essays, short stories, like you've been busy. And then you get to the survivalists and a book deal and a turn to fiction. And what I'm curious to know is what that was like for you, because a novel is its own beast, right? It's one thing to write like a 30-minute episode or like a 2,000-word essay or something, but to actually sit down and have to flesh out a novel is a chore. What was it like for you?
Oh, I have 3 drawer books. This is the 4th. This was the one where I was just like, if this doesn't get published, I'm going to do something else with my life. One of my biggest dreams is to publish a novel, but this is the last one. So I had a practice. I sat down every day. I very much knew what I wanted to achieve with this one. I outlined it. I knocked it out in 6 months. It just spent a while floating through the systems of getting representation and then like publishing proper, but easiest work of my life. I know that's not how first novels are supposed to be, but the one of mine that I spent like 8 years on is a drawer book.
So it's not it's your 4th book. It's really your 4th book. But that, I feel like that squares with like most experience. It's like, oh, you're an overnight success, but it's like not really, like it's like decades of failure or like more than a decade of failure and frustration. And like, it's hard I think it's hard to put a book in the drawer, like after all that work and to kind of realize that it didn't congeal, or maybe it's not. Maybe maybe you're just like have perspective on it and you realize that it's kind of normal. But I found that like it's so much work to write a book and then to have to sort of shelve it and start over again, on page 1. Was that tough for you, or did you just sort of like take it in stride?
Oh, me and the 8-year novel. Oh man, like I feel like it was like a long-term relationship kind of. We were together. I threw out the front half of the book. I threw out the back half of the book. I changed the characters entirely. I changed their backgrounds. I changed where they lived. I changed what they were musicians. I changed what sort of music they did. I would have thoughts about them like most days of the week for 8 years. So I would go in there and like redo the manuscript. I got 2 different agents for 2 vastly different versions of it. Even I remember the last one. They sent it out and they were just like the rejections were awful. They were just like, "What? We are very familiar with her career and her fans. Why doesn't she write something else?" What else does she want to write? Anything other than this? I think music books are hard. Every time I look back and go, oh, it would have been really cool to get that published, I remind myself of, there's this book called The Last Revival of Otherppl and Nev by Donnie Walton. I think she gets writing about music right. I think she really nails that whole, so it's a band that is in fiction, so you're never going to be able to hear their music. how do you write about that in a way that's compelling, which is a very tough question to satisfyingly answer. And as much as I love those guys that I created and like love their absolute hot mess of arguments in the 8 years I spent with them, I don't think I did that. I don't think I wrote their music in a way that really popped off the page and made you able to imagine it. I just don't think I transcended the form. I think she did. I think that's a great, like, everyone should read The Last Survival of Otherppl and Nev. I could see them. I could see their music. I could see the 70s that they fought in and made music in. I did not get there.
Are you musical at all? Did you ever play an instrument?
10 years of violin, 2 years of piano, 1 entire year of like improvised guitar where I wrote really bad songs and didn't actually learn how to play the guitar in like a beyond bad punk musician sort of way. Yeah, I think that's it. We always had a keyboard around. I bought like a bass with a dragon's head that some dude in Queens got in Thailand.
That's the only place. That's the only place you can get a guitar like that, right? It's just like off some dude. Yeah, it's got to be some dude in Queens who like.
Oh, for Christ's sake!
Yeah.
Wants to play you all of his music that some label didn't want. I sat there for like an hour with him in his apartment in Queens.
Oh my God!
To the space. It was amazing.
Well, listen, what you're saying registers with me because what I have found in my listening life, listening to podcasts and interviews through the years, one of the things that I've noticed is that interviews with musicians tend to be unsatisfying to me. I get frustrated because first of all, the person who's doing the interviewing is often not musical. Which is totally normal and fine, but it becomes hard. It's like they don't speak the language, right? So it's like hard for them to even articulate what they're talking about, or what they want to know about. And then the musician oftentimes is unable to talk about it satisfyingly either because it's just something that's so like action oriented. It's something they do, right? It's not like that kind of brainy writer brained type thing where it's language based. It's its own language. And so I just find that conversations about it can often be frustrating to listen to. Occasionally somebody can get there, or there'll be a musician who's, really eloquent about it, but it's not the norm. So it makes sense that would be an extra challenge, to try to write a book about it, to try to bring off the page because, like you're saying, the people reading it can't hear it. It's like you really have to do the work on the page to get people to have an imaginative experience that's satisfying. So a question then is, did you bring anything from the failed drawer novels into the survivalists? Like, did pieces survive? It must have been useful, with the benefit of hindsight to go through all those learning experiences, but I'm wondering if anything carried over.
I wrote an entire novel about gun dealing in Chicago. I had this cousin who got into trouble with the law. He was running around with gangs. I think they accused him of shooting somebody. I got really fascinated with that. I started looking into, how do young guys on the South Side end up with guns, because Chicago's gun laws are amazing, actually. It's that they drive them up from Indiana. And so I went out to an Indiana gun show and actually reported that out for BuzzFeed, because I was like, okay, well, what is Indiana like? How do you, what are the gun shows like? All of that is in a failed book, but a lot, I took the most interesting sections of that and put the research about the guns and the models and makes and what they do and what gun running is like in this one. So that wasn't failed at all. I feel like that book is actually very substantially represented here, even though it's a drawer book.
Yeah, that book was like research in a way.
Yep.
Yes. Where I divided my childhood between Wisconsin and Indiana, so I also lived in Indiana for a spell. Where in Indiana was this gun show? I'm curious.
Kokomo.
Outside
of Kokomo, not in the city proper, in a auditorium right outside.
Indiana's kind of weird, huh?
Yes. But friendly. I actually loved the people in my brief trips there.
I think Midwest people in general. But it's sort of like people talk about Southern manners and social grace or whatever. You sort of have that. My wife is from Minnesota, so they call it Minnesota nice. Have you ever heard that term?
Yes.
Where it's like, oh, hi, yeah, I'm sure you've seen some of this, but it's, it's only surface level. There can be some not so niceness underneath it all. It's sort of like what the Coen brothers, I think, are getting at in Fargo, where it's like, yeah, it's Minnesota nice, and there's like homicidal tendencies just below that surface.
Oh, a friend of mine is from Minnesota, and the way she puts it is, everyone's really happy to meet you, but they really wanted to meet you in second grade.
And that was it. Like, what does that even mean? They just they wanted, you have to be a lifelong friend to get in, and otherwise.
Yeah, they wanted to have grown up with you, and they were very skeptical about meeting you as an adult. And then I had a friend who moved there as an adult who 100% backed that up. She grew up in Wisconsin with me. It was like, before she moved there, it was like, oh, come on, it's basically going to be the same thing, right? Like, it's a 5-hour drive. Like, who cares?
Right.
And it was really hard for her to connect with people. They mostly hung out with their childhood friends. They did not want to meet her.
Maybe they don't trust people who didn't like stick it out. Like, it's like, you got to be a lifer in those winters, and you just show up. But I don't know. Every time I go, like, we go back to visit my wife's family, and it's usually in the summer. So it's like the weather's gorgeous and everything feels a little bit easier. I guess it's also recognizable to me because my experiences of early childhood in Wisconsin, it's a similar, like, tableau. Like the landscapes are very similar. But I guess maybe like more insular. I feel like I guess because I have the in of my wife having grown up there, we have sort of her network to sort of, like, people are nice, but I guess if I showed up there with my family and suddenly started trying to make friends, it might be different. And what you're saying about it makes me think of adults in general. Like, I often have this feeling of adults being really bad at making friends. Like, how do you get worse at that as you get older? It seems like something you would get better at, just having accrued more and more experiences with people. But, like, I look at my kids and they just go to school and they're like, you want to play? You know how kids are. Like, kids, that's it. They go to the park, they have a friend. It's not hard at all. But you become an adult and it's like, I don't trust you. Like, what the fuck is going on? Or it's like, you've got to be of a certain ilk in order to be in my crew, and all this different stuff. But it's kind of depressing how people get worse at that instead of better as they get older. Like, doesn't speak highly of the species.
I think you get to this point as an adult where you are less willing to make changes to your life, and really making a new friend is a big change. That person is probably not going to love everything you love or dislike everything you dislike, and so you have to compromise to, like, be with them. I think that gets tougher as you get older, and you're like, no, I like my life. I'm good. Why would I just want to meet people? Do something different.
Oh, there's something to be said too for, like, having your friends and being like, this is it. I don't have room for any more. Like, I've got my 5 or whatever it is. Like, do you have close friends? Like, are you somebody who's got, like, a crew, or are you super social or antisocial? Or
I have one super, super close friend from college, and we text, like, all the time.
Is this like the Nia? Is this like the Nia inspiration? I'm just going to guess, but, like,
no, the Nia inspiration is a train wreck friend that I had all over. Oh no, wait, no, I'm sorry. Part of the Nia inspiration is the nice part of the train wreck friend.
Okay.
And, like, all of the Brittany is the train wrecky part of the train wreck friend.
Okay.
That I had for like 15 years.
Yeah. It's a long train wreck.
The intimacy of that friendship, like, I mean, we went through a lot together. Like, she tried to, well, there was this dead guy on our couch in college. We were living with these people. This is a story.
Wait. There was a dead guy on your couch in college?
Dead guy on the couch in college. We had this apartment this summer between, like, freshman and sophomore year of college. It was in this house that was painted like cotton candy pink, so everybody knew it. They were like the pink house. This is important because when they found the dead guy, it was reported out through the news, and everybody was like, "Oh yeah, we heard that happened in the pink house." Like, Madison isn't that big, and one of our friends was, like, doing a lot of drugs, like, more than college students do. Like, it's funny how you know that, but we knew. She was, like, doing a lot of cocaine, and she, like, left our apartment and, like, went to go live in New York for the summer and told these 2 teenage drug dealers they could stay in her room. And so they were, like, dealing Adderall and we don't know what else out of their bedroom, and inviting their friends who did drugs and sometimes didn't wear shoes and had dirty black feet over to our place.
Oh my
because
God.
she told them that they could live there. And So they would have all their people, and I would usually just go into this bar. I was working 40 hours a week at JCPenney. No one else I worked with had a job. I needed to pay like my rent for next year. And so I was very much never there. Like, could we like maybe have a calmer existence? Like, do we have to live with like teenage white drug dealers who are like pretending that they're, you know, runaways when they could just go back home to the suburbs? And like, so at one point they would have all these parties, and they would invite all these people over, and like people would crash on our couch. But that's college. Like, it was common in our circles to wake up and have somebody crash on your couch. But I like left for work at Penny's one day, you know, and like my like early aughts polyester get up, like ready for another day of like not selling enough jeans to people. And my friend calls me like in the middle of the workday, like 2 hours in. She's like, "Hey, shout out." I was like, "Hey, what?" She's like, "Oh, you know that guy who was sleeping on our couch? Yeah, he's dead." What? What do you mean that guy's dead? Like, he's just asleep. She was like, "Oh no, like he's dead." I'm like, "How do you know?" She's like, "Because the paramedics said he was dead." I was like, "What? Excuse me? There were paramedics?"
Oh my God.
Yeah, call 911. I was like, "You serious?" I had just left the house 2 hours before. I'm like, how was there a take?
Was he dead when you left?
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
funny when a guy dies and you don't have anything to do with that, and it's amazing how much you don't learn.
Right.
We didn't learn why he died or when. We like were scanning his obituary for clues. It had to be an opiate overdose.
It sounds exactly like an opiate overdose. He probably took some pill.
I have no idea. The thing is, all those people who were living there, who they would invite to their parties, did all sorts of like. Well, I don't even know what they did because I did not hang out with them. The rumor was that they did tons of drugs. And what's funny is our other respectable drug dealer friends who lived down the block who did like reasonable amounts of reasonable drugs. This is college. We're like, "Oh, those people you're living with, they're insane. They do unreasonable amounts of drugs. We just like make weed brownies and like do the occasional round of coke, but those people."
Right. It's just so disgraceful. Low class.
I didn't talk to her for 6 months. And then like at some point she was just like, she emailed me and was just like, "I want to continue the friendship. We've been friends for a long time. I realized that a lot of stuff went down in that house and somebody died and you hate me." But because she wanted to keep them there. She was the one who didn't want to throw out the drug dealers.
So wait, the friend that went to New York and like put these guys into your house, that's the friend who wanted to continue the friendship.
Oh, no. That's my best friend at the time was the one who wanted to keep them there. The friend who went to New York, we just never heard from her again. She would send in her rent payments and then nothing. But my best friend was living there and she wanted to keep the drug dealers in the house. And we had a lot of fights about that because I didn't want to live with the teenage drug dealers.
Right.
And so when the guy died, I blamed her. I'm like, "You didn't kick these people out." I wanted to kick them out. Me and our third roommate had been talking about kicking them out for a month. Like, we didn't want the parties. These people wouldn't talk to me. They had their own thing. They didn't want to hang out, and I didn't want to hang out with them either. It was mutual. And I just didn't want all these people and their drugs and like the randomness in the house. I was the only white person in this entire scenario, and I was just convinced I was going to get arrested.
Yeah. You're like, when the cops come, when the Madison cops come, they're coming for me, right? Like,
they are. I would tell them that. They would just be like, "Oh, please, the cops aren't coming." They'd just be like, "They're dealing drugs. You never know if the cops are going to come." Like, well, you know?
Well, that's what I was going to say. But I mean, like, there would be. That's a reasonable thought to have, especially for somebody, I guess you weren't in law school at that point. But like, if you're living with somebody who is doing illegal shit, don't you have potentially some legal exposure, even if you're not directly involved? I mean, I guess you could always claim you didn't know, but I mean, it seems like something that could get messy.
It is, actually, having gone to law school. Yeah, it is something that could get messy. What if, I mean, it depends on how they try to argue the case they're bringing against you, but what if you aided and abetted? What if they, I mean, sometimes the council just makes stuff up. What if they thought we gave them the drugs? We didn't. Like, me and that group of friends of mine who were living in the house, we think the drug dealers did that. But what if we were, like facilitating the environment by not kicking them out? It depends on like how you look at it legally. But I at the time, it's bizarre. I was like 19. I didn't know anything. I was surprised to learn that, in fact, I had been concerned about the right things.
Yeah. No, listen, I was on a road trip in like an RV in college with I went to Boulder. So we were all hippies for like a minute, and I remember being on this road trip out west with my friends and like pulling off to the side of the road to sleep in some it was like what's the word for it? Like a consumer district. There were like stores, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't out of the way. Like we were right in the middle of downtown in this town. And like some people were like sleeping on the roof of the camper and like, it was just very noticeable. And I'm like this guy from the Midwest who grew up being chased by cops and like, you know, like redneck cops in Indiana who had nothing better to do than like fuck with teenagers.
Yep.
And I just remember having a very antagonistic relationship with the police and being so afraid of them. And so I was like, all right, everybody, like, give me the weed. I'm going to like bury it. You know, like, so my friends are like, Brad's paranoid. Like, give the paranoid guy the weed. I'm like, listen, I'm not going to jail. If they come, like, you're playing like bongo drums on the roof of a camper at 2 a.m. Like, I'm not going to deal with the cops at that hour and have them search this thing and find the weed. And I feel good about that decision. I still feel good about it. I'm thinking, you know, like I'm protecting myself. Like, we're going to bury the drugs, you know, and,
I'm with you. Bury that weed.
What's that?
I'm with you. Bury that weed.
Yeah. So I relate, you know, and I'm glad that you didn't get, it sounds like, you know, it didn't end up being something that you had to deal with. Like, they just took the guy out and like, what happened, you know? Like,
at first they were like, well, the cops want to talk to you. And I was like, oh, shit. And then it turned out they didn't. Like, they did their first round of interviews and I was not part of like any second or subsequent round. And I dodged a bullet and I could go back to work at JCPenney. And then I moved out because I was like, you know what? If you guys won't kick these people out of our apartment, then I'm going to leave. And I moved back in with my parents who lived across town. And yeah, that was that. And I paid an absolutely ridiculous. We lost our security deposit because somebody threw a glass top coffee table off of our back deck. And then somebody ran up, like, at the time, a very expensive $140 in international phone calls. And then that was that.
What were the international phone calls? Like buying drugs?
I don't know.
Who knows?
Think about leaving your house that you've conceded to drug dealers. You have no idea what's going on.
The pink house. Is it still pink? Have you been back lately?
No,
do you know?
They painted it. I often wonder if that's our fault.
Yeah.
It's like a regular shade of blue now. You never know.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like it's a little bit, what's the word? You know, if you're going to be running drugs out of a house, you don't want it to be a noticeable house. Neutral tones.
Run drugs out of your tan house. Yeah. Nobody will notice.
Exactly. So you're out in LA now. You've got this book in the world. Has it lived up? I mean, as somebody who's written all these drawer books, as you put it, and has kind of had this dream for a long time, what's the, like, when the dream meets reality, like, how's the experience been for you so far?
I like it because despite the drawer books, this is the book I would fight for. Like, this is the one for me. Like, I would be happy to defend it with a sword. And so all the things that have come its way, I'm very happy with because I absolutely love the underlying work and would kill for it.
Yeah. What about what's the word? Adaptation? Like, since you do screenwriting and, you know, writing for television as well and have been kind of working in entertainment, like, is there any talk of adapting it, or is that something you want to do?
I can't talk about that. Let's put it that way. Like, you know what I mean? It's something I want to do. And it's my Hollywood crew is working on that sort of thing, but I can't talk about it.
So your agent is sitting slightly off camera right now, and I have like
to my left, poking me if I say
that. Right. I understand. And then what about, like, do you have a vision, like, for how you would hope your creative life would grow from here? Because you're doing different things. Like, you've got the Twitter, which I think is just like great, like, joke repository, and maybe kind of like, I feel like maybe you use it as a laboratory. That might be the best use of Twitter, is like telling jokes, but as a writer, like you say, like honing a style or something, you know, and coming up with a way of communicating and a way of being funny. And then you've got your literary career, which means novels, means short stories, means, you know, essays and stuff that you might write for the New York Times or whatever it is. And then you've got the TV writing. Like, do you have a sense of how you hope it will go from here on out? Do you have like a plan or any kind of list of goals or something that you're kind of tracking?
Well, I have a second novel that I'm not going to talk about in any great substance. I'd like to finish that, and then I'd like to start adapting my own stuff as a TV writer. I am looking for another show home. I'd love to do something else with television. I have a little bit of development I can't talk about, but that is fun. I sincerely hope to be able to talk about it someday because, you know, it gets public. on the TV end. I basically want to, and all the essays and stuff are just things that I'm inspired by in the moment. And like, I'm so happy to have editors who don't mind if I hit them up with the absolute most random shit. And I'd like to keep that going too.
I feel like you're really good at like cultural criticism and like not everybody is, you know. I feel like that's a particular gift, is to be able to like rapidly assess and respond to things that are happening in the moment, you know. I don't know. That's a particular thing that I think only a few people are good at, because I don't know. I don't know if you feel this way, but like I don't have it. I come up with some response that feels good in the moment, and then like the next day I'm like, what? Or you know what I'm saying? Like I'm impressed by people who can think that quickly.
I guess I don't hang on to any of it. I go, well, this is a thought I had like one day, and the next day it's over. It helps when you talk about a lot of topical stuff. I mean, hopefully in 3 weeks we're not all going to be like, haha, there's no Speaker of the House, you know, like. And so it's just going to let go of things where the moment has passed.
Yeah. What a shit show! Like you know. It's enjoyable though, right? And by the way, for listeners, because this episode will go up maybe after the fact, like we're talking about the inability for the Republicans to elect a Speaker of the House in the United States Congress, and the level of dysfunction. I'm sure you dealt with a lot of this when you were writing for The Daily Show, but just like I had this conversation last night with a friend where I'm like, what does this part, like the Republican Party, what does it even stand for? Like, I don't even get like what they're about, you know. It just seems like some crazy cult or something, and it's wild to watch a human being like Kevin McCarthy withstand this like repeated humiliation on the altar of his ambition. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's like this guy, it's like, what did I say to my wife this morning? This is really crude, but I'm like, this kind of reminds me of one of these like Wall Street guys who likes to get peed on. Do you know what I'm saying?
I've had those thoughts for 3 days. I'm like, he's got a humiliation fetish, and now it's public.
That's what I'm saying. It's like a kink. He's like, he's like sweating and like, you know, like, I'm like, man, I don't know any human being who would put himself through this for a job. And like, the other thing that's so funny about it is that even if he gets the job ultimately, it's going to be a job in title only. He's going to be on the shortest of short leashes, and he's going to have no functional power, essentially. He's going to have the job without any of the trappings, and yet he's willing to completely debase himself to get it. It's wild.
Yeah, it's really clear that he's not going to be able to get all of them to vote for anything. He can't even get all of them to vote for him. So how is he going to get them all to vote for, like, you know, a 24/7 showing of Hunter Biden's laptop? He's not going to get that.
Yeah.
So why does he even want to do this? I would never want to lead the Republicans. They don't agree on anything. They don't like each other. They don't like themselves. Literally, who would want to?
Yeah. It's a weird bunch. It's definitely a weird bunch. Well, I have really loved meeting you. I have been an admirer of yours and just like a fan, and you're just a delight on my Twitter feed, which I have to say, not everybody is. Like Twitter's a mixed bag, in case you haven't noticed, but you are consistently funny and smart and interesting. And I'm sort of marveling at all the success you've had, you know, like writing for TV. Like, I guess before I let you go, I should ask, because you've done different kinds of TV writing. You know, there's The Daily Show, which is like you're writing jokes, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe bits too. Like they do some bits. Mm-hmm. But then writing for like scripted television, like that's a different animal.
Yep.
Do you have a preference? Like I'm curious, like and you also wrote for Pod Save America, if I have that right. So like, I imagine that's more like political jokey stuff too, but like, can you just talk maybe a bit before I let you go about like what you learned, maybe doing joke writing and kind of churning through a daily show, like The Daily Show, but a show that like airs, you know, multiple days a week versus writing scripted television that maybe goes up once a week and, you know, has a more narrative bent.
The Daily Show taught me how to be fearless, because every day at 9 a.m. you had to wake up and pitch 60 people in a room, including Trevor. And you couldn't be that, you had to like pitch something like kind of regularly, and you know, it had to be good. You would basically be tried to make the funniest, most on point thing of the day in order to win the day and get your stuff written into a script, or hopefully write the script yourself. And it was really nice to go through that experience, because I will never fear public speaking again. I will never fear doing anything in front of other people again. will just never happen. And I also will not, you had to pitch like 25, 50 jokes a day. And so like,
how did you do? How did you do? Like, I want to know, like, did you do well from the beginning, or was it something where you're like, wow, I was really bad at the beginning and then I got better, you know, or was it like kind of just up and down? It seems like it would be up and down, but like, how was it in terms of like?
It is up and down, but I definitely remember getting some Prince joke in the first day. Like the very first day I was there, like 3 hours later, I had a joke on television. I was like, wow.
Whoa.
You guys serious?
What was the joke? What was the joke? Do you remember?
I do not recall. This is like 6 years ago.
Okay.
But I remember they were just like, whoa, first day. And I was like, hey, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. It's a nice way to start.
You ebb and flow. Like there are days you hit worse than other days. You know, every once in a while in the early Trump, there were days I think when it was just hard to pitch anything because it was like, oh man, like I gotta care about Jared Kushner again. Are you serious?
Yeah. Fuck that guy.
But your job is to get up off the mat and go, you know what? Since I have to be here, being paid to care about Jared Kushner, I'm gonna find a way to care about Jared Kushner. And that's a useful attitude in comedy too. I mean, everything isn't going to be like your favorite subjects to do jokes about. And so it is nice to just sit up there and know that you can start out with something and then add a twist and then end up with a punchline about things that you don't care about just to like, you know, put food on the table. So it was a good way to do that too.
But it was also
stuff is, go ahead.
I know just before we leave the Daily Show, is like the time that you were writing for the Daily Show it's like a particularly perilous time in our political history. Like, you know, like the stakes were so high. Like it had to be in some ways, I don't know. I can see how it could be easy to write jokes, especially from like a place of anger, you know, or anger at injustice and just like, fuck this shit. But I could also imagine where like the stakes were so high that it was like, maybe like too heavy. You know what I'm saying? Like I can imagine like a malaise, you know, being like, oh my God, you know, how do I be funny when it's this grim, you know?
Very much so. There were definitely days when I think everybody was just kind of like, so what did the jokes mean today? So like, what is and also I think he was fairly new at it at the time. Like he'd only been doing Daily Show for a year. So it was also like, what kind of show do we want to have? A lot of things were kind of up in the air.
You mean Trevor? You mean Trevor?
Yes,
like,
Trevor.
Yeah.
But also on top of all that, there was just like, so what does Trump mean? What kind of president is he going to be? We didn't know that yet. I started working there like 4 days after he got sworn in or something insane like that. And so when he started like throwing exec orders at people every day and stuff, we were all just like, so is this going to become law? It took like a long time to figure out how he worked. And so it was hard to joke about him on that regard until you got the hang of it, because we didn't know what kind of president he would be because he came from outside of government and he didn't seem to care about the workings or the rhythm of government as much as other presidents had. And so it was just sort of hard to tell how he works. A lot of political comedy is referencing things about people where people know what you're talking about. Like if you reference Ted Cruz or whatever, you know, it's about like referring to the fact that nobody ever seems to like him, like interpersonally.
Right.
So that your audience goes, oh yeah, Ted Cruz, that's who we're joking about. We remember that. He doesn't have any friends or whatever it is.
Right.
And so it was tough to do that with Trump because he had all that bluster and he had all that like business person stuff, but just as a president, because he didn't have like a legislative background, it was hard to know how much of his stuff would become law, especially since really from a constitutional perspective, he was trying to do a ton of stuff that either did get shot down or should have been.
Yeah.
But also he stacked the courts. And so the courts made it so that it was hard to predict what would become law and what would stick because they weren't deciding things based on things like prior law anymore. And his lower level judges. Now that's leaked into the Supreme Court where they're just kind of like, well, we had a feeling today. And so like, we don't
like you said it earlier, the mood, you know, like that's a weird word to associate with like the highest court in the land. Like, what's the mood, guys? You know, like forget prior case law.
Oh, they are rogues and fives at this point. Like I just somebody who like used to practice law, like you guys aren't reading the law that much anymore, are ya? Like that's kind of beside the point.
Ugh. All right. So then narrative, you make the leap from the Daily Show to writing scripted television, which I guess squares more with like your novel and, you know, like more traditional modes of storytelling. But was that a leap that you were happy to make? Like, was it nice to maybe get out of like the grind of writing jokes day after day and showing up at 9 a.m. and having to pitch? Did the pace change? Was it like a relief, or I don't know, was there less less action? Like, was there something, like, was it a letdown in any way because it wasn't as like, what's the word? There wasn't as much adrenaline. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, what was the shift like?
I did miss the adrenaline a bit, but it was really nice to get out of Trump land.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Do you know how much less I thought about Trump every day?
I can imagine.
I actually put this restriction on. I'm like, I am not going to listen to his voice anymore. And I have not heard his voice since I left The Daily Show. I figure if he says anything important, they will report that for me in a news article that I can read on my phone, and I don't have to listen to his voice. I had spent so much time like staying up watching 11 p.m. CNN coverage to try and pitch an angle.
Yeah.
I saw more Trump than anyone should ever have to.
Listen, there was an oral history of The Daily Show that came out in book form after Jon Stewart left, and I read that book. And when I got done reading it, I felt a sense of there was a sense of gratitude for wow, covering this and trying to make jokes day after day, but also a sense of real sympathy. Yeah, I think the way he put it was having to do this show day after day is like eating a shit sandwich every day. I think it was something like that. And it wore on him to a degree that I think I didn't recognize, wore on him emotionally. I don't know, just became I think it maybe made him depressed or embittered, you know what I'm saying? And then so I can imagine working on a show like that and having to kind of eat the shit sandwich and then make jokes from it every day. After a while, starts to have a toxic effect, and starts to affect your mood, right?
Sometimes, but also the biggest problem, in my opinion, was just so much of what was going on was actually just really scary. I mean, I remember just going, are we going to be on the air in 2 years, or are they going to outlaw satire? That was the mood.
Yeah.
And so it is definitely, you are there telling jokes about the bad, depressing things that happen in the world. So you really have to engage and go deep on the depression. And that is hard to do and hard to emotionally sustain. But there's also just, he was doing stuff like the Muslim ban.
Yeah.
The Muslim ban is depressing and racist and garbage. And it was ruining people's lives. There was all that footage about people getting stuck in airports trying to see their family. It would be hard to just watch hours and hours of coverage of that and try and find an angle. It was also hard to just deal with the implications of it. We were making jokes about it, and that was fair, and it was a way of bringing attention to that, and that was 100% cool. But also, the Muslim ban was wrecking people's lives. It was just a really depressing thing to have to deal with. I definitely left The Daily Show with a lot more respect for things like activism. I think jokes are fun, but I think that sometimes you see these depressing issues and it's best to get directly involved, and jokes are definitely a way to deal with it, but you should, be calling your congressman, you should be organizing with your friends, you should be
taking action
to reverse the Muslim ban.
Yeah. I get it. And it's, it's interesting too, because I think Jon Stewart bowed out in 2016. So Trevor Noah took over right as things got super dark, things were chaotic and dumb and wrongheaded. And, in some ways menacing under Stewart, with the era that he did. But Trevor Noah really covered a dark era in American political history. I mean, that's a grind. And it's, he just signed off, right? He just ended his yeah. I can imagine why he just must have been okay, I'm done. I'm tapping out. I did my time. It's a heavy lift, right?
Yeah, it is heavy.
What's he going to do next? I wonder. I guess he's got to figure it out. No idea. All right. Well, listen, I could talk to you all day. I've really enjoyed meeting you. Congratulations to you on all of the success that you've had, across the spectrum, and in particular with the survivalists. And I wish you luck on all that you have going. I'd be interested to see what you do next.
Thank you. It has really been a pleasure talking to you too.